All right, that's time. I've chewed that handful of popcorn. I think it's time to kick things off. Hello and welcome to US Rugby Happy Hour Live. Thank you so much for tuning in. Happy Hour Live brings you interviews with some of the biggest names in the US rugby scene. And once again, we have two big guests lined up. It's a little feedback there. We have two big guests lined up tonight. Journalist and author now, Martin Pengelly joins us to talk about his new upcoming book, Brotherhood, When West Point Went to War. Then later in the show, US Rugby 7-star and social media influencer Ilona Maher joins us as well. So stay tuned for both of them. If you are listening in live on Facebook, YouTube, or LinkedIn tonight, that's our first for LinkedIn, you can leave comments or questions in those chats, or join us over here on Twitter Spaces on the mobile app, and you can even ask your own questions of our guests live. Also, if you're not already following us, please do so at Eagles Overseas and Rugby Morning to get updates on future shows and news about USA Rugby, Major League Rugby, and much more. I am Bill Baker of Eagles Overseas, and with me, as always, is Rugby Morning's John Fitzpatrick. Hey, Fitzy.
Hey, Bill. How's it going?
I'm good, man. I'm good. It's been a fine Wednesday. How's your Wednesday been?
Good. I'm still kind of shocked by the news that Oklahoma DC's head coach will be moving over to Italy at the end of the MLR season. But
Yeah,
I'm excited for him. But hopefully, Oklahoma DC can close out this season with a playoff push.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, as a coach, I guess a coach is pretty important, obviously, but maybe, I'm not putting on him that they're finishing there or maybe getting the playoffs, but maybe a new coach would help. Who knows?
Well, I would dust off your resume. Maybe you write a cover letter and submit it.
Yes. My years of coaching girls soccer puts me right there at the top of the list. So, listen, I want to do a quick shout out. Speaking of Major League Rugby, I was at the Free Jacks game this past weekend, and there's a gentleman there, Martin Beck. He runs the New England Grass-Fed Beef Company out of Portsmouth, Rhode Island. It's the Cloverbud Ranch. Now, this is not a paid sponsorship or anything like that. I just want to give him a shout out because he gave me a pound of this amazing ground beef while we were tailgating. And he supplies a lot of the meats and stuff for the Free Jacks during the cookouts and whatever. And he donates $50 per try during the Free Jacks season to a charity. I don't know if you've been paying attention, but the Free Jacks are scoring a lot of tries.
he's giving away a lot of ground beef.
Yeah. So please go to newenglandgrassfed.com and help this guy out. But
well, you have my address, so you should send some ground beef my way, please.
I will. It just won't be in like a frozen pack or anything like that. So good luck eating that in a week and a half.
I'll tell you what. For our next guest, for Martin, we'll hand it off to him. He can take the Acela down when he comes down to DC, and you can drop it off.
Put it right in the U-Haul. Yeah, right in the back of the U-Haul. That's perfect. All right. With that said, let's jump over to him. All right. Our first guest tonight, joining us, journalist and now author of his book, which I cannot wait to read, Brotherhood, When West Point Went to War. Let's all welcome Martin Pengelly. How are you, Martin?
Very well indeed. Thanks very much for having me along.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. How's your day going? Is your Wednesday good too?
It was brutally busy for news. Yeah. My day job on politics with the DeSantis stuff and Tucker Carlson's home studio being taken apart. So, long one.
I missed
long
that.
One. Good one.
Yeah, well, maybe I shouldn't say this now then, but as of now, we're having less technical difficulties than Elon and DeSantis did earlier tonight on Twitter Spaces. I may have jinxed us, but we'll find out. Martin, before we get into the book, your rugby playing experience has been well documented, none of which seems to be embellished. So tell us a bit about your rugby background. I believe I read you played second row.
Yes, second row forward. In any rugby that was of any standard, I had to play second row. I played back row in lesser stuff. Yeah. Second row forward for a couple of clubs in Yorkshire, for Durham University, for Rosslyn Park in London, which is the link that the thing that introduced me to West Point by the tour game. And then when I was how old was I? I was only 23 when I got lucky and got a job with Rugby News magazine, which doesn't exist anymore. It used to be the smaller version to Rugby World in London. Got a gig with them and stayed in rugby writing after that. Went to broadsheet papers as a rugby sub-editor mostly, which meant playing. And then again got, even spectacularly lucky, married an American, moved over here in 2012. And one day decided to give Nigel Melville a call because he used to coach one of my clubs in Yorkshire. He coached Otley when I was playing there as a colt. And I just gave him a call to sort of write something about American rugby, see if there was something to write. And that was 10 years ago, and I'm still going.
Well, welcome. We're enjoying your writings on the game of rugby, both here and abroad. It was the more and more journalists we can get involved in U.S. rugby and the American rugby scene, the better. I mean, it hasn't been a lot of names out there covering it. So, yeah, keep it going, man. Enjoying it. All right.
Right.
So let's jump into it. Let's talk about your book, again, Brotherhood, When West Point Went to War. And just to say, when I was reading your 2015 Guardian article about West Point Rugby, I may or may not have shed a couple tears. If this book is anything like the article, I'm doomed. So talk about the book. Just talk about the book for us.
Well, the article came about because when I was playing for Rosslyn Park in their emerging players 15, which was sort of de facto third team, maybe a sort of extra second team, we played a tour game against Rosslyn Park at Aldershot, the British Army Sports Stadium. We were helping them warm up to play Sandhurst, and it was a one-off game. It was a game I'd never experienced anything like it because the West Point cadets were, West Point cadets. They were absurdly fit. They were surprisingly to us surprisingly good, and that's not in any kind of patronising way. We thought we were going to go and play some Americans, and who knows what it would be like. And it was a fantastic game. That was 2002. It lodged in my head while I carried on working in rugby. In the simplest version is I always wondered what had happened to them, because that game was about almost exactly a calendar year before the invasion of Iraq. And then when I years later, 13 years later, I got a sports editor at Guardian US, who's still there, great man Tom Lutz, to let me set up an interview up at West Point, go up, get the train, go there and see if there was a story. And in that trip, Mike Maher, the legendary coach of West Point men's rugby, was retiring for the final time. His office was literally full of cartons. He was packing up to go, so I just got there in time. And he put the 2002 seniors photo on his desk, which is that incredible photo ended up at the top of the Guardian piece.
Mm-hmm.
Sepia photo, wearing kilts, carrying rugby balls. And even if you just see that story, you think, that photo, you think, well, there's a story there.
Yeah.
I was blown away by West Point anyway. I'm a history grad. I'm a history nut. I'm a Ken Burns nut of 30 years. I was kind of in for the ride. But then he showed me the photo, and a couple of 2004 grads were there who'd played with the O2 team who could tell me. And he pointed. I mean, the Guardian piece is one big spoiler for the book, because the book is the Guardian piece at book length. So it's not giving anything away to say that Mike pointed to 3 players O2 team who were no longer alive, no longer with us, and told me about that. So I went away a bit daunted. One thing, the bizarre thing, is ironic, given the subsequent 8 years when the story hasn't let me go, is I didn't put Mike or the 204 grads, Mike Ziegelhofer and Ben Pafford, on record. I said, I'm not sure if I can do this. I want to do this. It'll take me all summer. I'll be back in touch. And I think they thought that was a bit weird. And looking back at it, it was a mistake. But I was just slightly daunted by the evident scale of the story to be told. So I spent the summer mostly calling, because I'm a full-time news journalist. So rugby travel is a bit tricky. So I spent the summer mostly calling the players, points around America, doing half-hour phone chats, going through things with them, and I managed to do the piece. We did a short video that went with it. We got lucky again. We went to do this short video about West Point Rugby. I know the 2015 team were playing Buffalo up at Anderson, and Mike Mahan was there. He'd come back to watch. So I then finally got an interview with him. But that was pure luck. It was just incompetence on my part. And I mean, I can carry on into how it turned into a book if I'm not going on too great.
Well, let me jump in real quick. When talking about that photo you mentioned,
Yeah.
when I saw that, I thought, oh, that's a great photo they staged for the article, for the book, or whatever. It's brilliant. The sepia tone, the kilts, the cleats, the bare feet. But then to realize, no, that's not staged. That's them.
Yeah.
That's pretty daunting.
Yeah, it's quite something. I watched the day I went there in 2015. I watched that year's seniors taking a photo, and there are only about 5 of them, I think, in that photo. But it's a tradition, and Nightingale Hall is, one of the oldest buildings, or if not the oldest building on the campus. So it's just the whole place just sort of exerted its hold on me, and I don't feel too bad saying that, because people like Charles Dickens have had the same experience.
Wow.
Going out to, he did 1842. He went up to West Point on his American tour and was like, "Good God, this place." It's easier for visitors, of course, and Brits and so on to go there, because you're not going there as a cadet to be beasted for 4 years.
I'm assuming you went by horseback and you went by train.
I've developed a ridiculous affinity for the Hudson Valley line. I just love it. I love going up and down it. But that's why after the 2015 story, the thing stuck. It went through a couple of iterations as a possible book. After 2015, I got to know a couple of the players quite well. I got to know Matt Blinn, the captain, particularly well, because he lives close to my wife's family's summer place in Massachusetts. So it's easy to go see him and have a few beers. So I started trying to make it into a book proposal by doing a few more chapters, worked with Matt on one. And then I did a book proposal where I wrote an op-ed for the New York Times in 2017, I think, about being a fan of American rugby and a Brit in American rugby. And as happens all over American rugby, a literary agent who had played scrum half at Kenyon College in Ohio got in touch and said, "Have you got any book like this?" And I said, "Yes." We did. We put together a very, very detailed proposal, and I did a couple more chapters for that. Went to talk to one of the old superintendents in DC, that kind of thing. But no one picked that one up. That was shopped around to the big publishers. Like, we had meetings with Hachette and HarperCollins, I think, and no one picked it up. It was quite frustrating. It was a really great experience, but didn't happen. So the book sort of went into abeyance, but I stayed in touch with the players, and I was always wondering about it. And then it's kind of fate again. Trying to do a short version. During COVID, I was down to do an interview with an author of a book about Abraham Lincoln, which is one of my other special pet subjects. Fantastic book called Lincoln on the Verge by Ted Widmer, about Lincoln's trip to Washington in 1861, his train trip. Can't recommend it highly enough, not just because Ted got me a book deal, but partly. In short order, Ted and I became friends. We're having lunch, and he said, "You got any book ideas?" And I said, "Yes, funny you should ask." And I outlined it, and he said, "I know a guy who just bought a publisher who played fullback for Harvard."
Ooh.
And I thought, well, that's the fairy god. That's the fairy god. So the great Will Thorndike, who owns Godine Press up in Boston, which is a literary press. I'm very, very happy that among my fellow authors are George Orwell and Charles Bukowski. They picked it up. We did some work on a new proposal. I reordered some chapters, did some editing with Ted, and they picked it up. So it was pure. I don't believe in fate really, but it was meant to happen. This is a book that tried to happen. I cocked up a couple that happened, and now it's happened. So I spent 2 years writing.
Wow. So yeah, Martin, I want to go back and talk a little bit about, as you're putting the story together and you're staying in touch with the players, and these events happened, 20-some years ago or so. Did the players or the participants in the book have any issues kind of revealing their thoughts to you about the events that took place in the book? Was that a struggle?
Sometimes it's a struggle because they're 20 years ago. Something came up the other day, and I was talking to Matt, the captain, and I was like, it was a fact check, and I was like, what do you remember about this? He's like, I have no idea, cannot remember. It's quite a major thing. I mean, it's not dramatic. We can get it sorted.
Yeah.
There's different versions of it. There's the natural 20 years of trying to remember. There's 20 years of trying to remember when you were a student and you were playing rugby and you're having a good time, so you might not remember for various reasons connected to that. And then much more, the right word would be seriously or dramatically, in dealing with how the three cadets, Zach, Joey, and Jim, who died very young, in those chapters, you're asking people to remember and discuss extremely traumatic things, and that was each one a whole experience, and I mean, I guess you'd say profound.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really it's for my long career in journalism, I'm not really a sort of door-knocking reporter. I never have been. I'm an editor and a sports writer, which is different. So I've constantly had to steel myself to ask questions I wasn't sure would be comfortable for people to answer. Mm-hmm. But the degree to which people opened up in all cases and every aspect of the book, from the other players talking about their friendships and how they found out about the guys who died, through to, in Jim's case, at the end of the book, reconstructing his final convoy with people who were in it. Mm-hmm. It's I suppose I forgot. I almost am in danger of forgetting how remarkable it's been to work on it, because I've just been so immersed.
Yeah, I imagine immersing yourself in the subject. You really get into it. Was there like a moment or story or event that really maybe blew you away or stood out from you?
I mean, it's all of a whole. One of the things I've promised myself for the next book, if I do another book, is not to have 15 main characters in a 100,000 word book, because it's a bit ludicrous. I mean, there's plenty. I don't want to. It feels wrong to single out much.
Sure.
I mean, the book opens, which is something that's not in the 2015 piece, with a chapter about Matt Blynn's experiences in Mosul in late 2004, when that city kicked off, blew up, whatever the word would be. That's pretty extraordinary, because just the way Matt remembered it, he told me about before the fighting started, what his soldiers did to keep busy, which was they put scorpions and mice in bottles and put bets on the fight. Okay. Which is just what bored soldiers will do. And it turns out, with a bit of light research, it turns out it's pretty much what like Roman legionaries were doing around there 2,000 years ago when they were waiting to be attacked. But that sort of, I seized on that, whether it's a good one or not, I seized on that as a metaphor for the sort of Iraq experience. I go to, but the scorpion and the mouse stuck in a bottle. That was right at the start of the writing process. There's another point where Pete Chacon, the winger, described how he survived an IED in Mosul around about the same time, which is a remarkable passage. But it has that has an edge of humor, and the main thing about this team, and I think the main thing about any rugby team, they are both unique and not unique at all. They're like it's a really good example of what a rugby team is. But the sense of humor is constant, and Pete tells the story of being blown up and waking up to find that the men he was commanding had arrested everyone in the vicinity, which is what they'd agreed to do. If a bomb went off underneath any Humvee, there was just anyone who wasn't involved in it was to set a perimeter and arrest everybody. just to see if they could find the trigger man. But it turned out Pete's men had arrested a bunch of Catholics who had come out. The only Catholics in Mosul who'd come out of the church to help, and they all got arrested.
God.
And it's just ludicrous, and you know, it's sort of it's a bit makes you think of Joseph Heller, that kind of thing. But it's just real life that Pete's remembering and talking about. And you just sit there shaking your head when you're listening to the tape. And then you try and get it on the page.
So, Martin, one of the common sentiments from the cadets that they were all battered and beaten in their first matches, but then each of them said, "I fell in love with it." Does that seem to be more relevant with the Army or maybe military sides than maybe normal?
I don't think it's unique.
Okay.
Again, in the book, I quote a writer called Rick Atkinson from up near Boston. I think he's up near Boston, who wrote a book about 10 years ago called Memoirs of a Rugby Playing Man, about how he found rugby at college in the late 70s. I think he still plays. He's like 65. He's still going. He says, there's a quote, it's something like, discovering that running into the opposition full tilt was an existential moment that couldn't be faked, which is a literary way of putting it. But I think it might be a sort of American experience to generalize grossly. But people who discover rugby at college, particularly if they've played football at high school, discover that existential moment that can't be faked. They discovered the thing of whacking someone with no pads. And in Brian Phillips's words, which I put on I tweeted today, that notion that, hey, I'm allowed to run with the ball and tackle and pass, which I'm not in my former, in Brian's case as an offensive lineman. It's like, it seems, if there's ways, which I think I've already said in the conversation somewhere, that the West Point rugby experience sort of seems to concentrate common traits a bit and sort of show them in high relief because of the West Point drama and difference and so on, then that might apply. I'm not saying West Point is extra special. West Point's just West Point. It's unique. So that kind of thing, yeah.
Martin, I was just thinking about back the 2002 match that you had, and I wanted to ask this earlier, but who won that match?
Rushden Park did.
Okay.
There's a difference over the score. It will never be known. I was a keen little writer at the time, trying to write novels. So I was keeping a diary, which I've stopped keeping now, but I kept for about 25 years. And my diary says it was 41-25 to us. But the West Point tour report, written by Gerard Adams, the 2002 team's winger and poet and toastmaster, says it was 45-21. Yeah. So I suspect he might be right because he enumerates the scores, but I don't know.
Hey, real quick, listeners, and before I'm going to toss over to Fitzy in a second here, but listeners, we've got about another 10 minutes with Martin Pengelly. If you'd like to come up here and ask him a question, you can do so by requesting in the bottom left of your app. I'm sorry, I was going to mention this earlier, but I'm just listening and asking questions here. But you can come up and ask Martin a question yourself as well about the book or about rugby in general, or about that match in 2002. Maybe you played in it. Well, coming up, we'll try to get you up here as soon as possible. Go ahead, Fitzy.
Yeah, Martin, I wanted to ask, you mentioned when you went up to West Point to kind of start the story process there, Coach Mahan was, I guess, retiring. What kind of an influence or impact did he have on the players? They seem to think quite highly of him as a coach and as a person.
Yeah, they call him Father Mahan, and you can see precisely why. It's in the book. It's not. It was staged in part to help the book, but it's also ended up in the book. In 2021, in the summer, there was a reunion up at Matt, the captain's place in Cohasset, which I went to get some very, very, very vital interviews, and also, meet the guys I'd never met but spoke to on the phone, and so on and so on. And Coach Mahan came, and I thought, and this is my outsider's view, his presence then 19 years on, was just evident. His father Mahan, when he speaks, the players listen, and that's true for West Point rugby players for what would it be, 30 some years of his coaching there. He sort of is West Point rugby, really. And I find it fascinating, again, as a British person coming in, to find out that he never played. He just came to rugby as a coach at West Point and came to use it as a way to shape and train cadets, but never played himself, which I think is absolutely fascinating. As a book, it's like, I keep thinking, I said there's never write a book with 15 main characters. It's 16, I think, with Mike Maher. You could write a whole book about Mike. I could write, the standard thing I've said to a few people is I could have written, I mean, I'm not saying I would because it's not the point, it's the story of the whole team, but you could write a whole book about Jim Gerbitz, his life story leading up to his death in Baghdad. You could write a whole book about anyone's life story, and you could write a whole book about Mike Mahan's impact on West Point rugby and American rugby, I think.
I got to bring it up because the introduction, written by H.R. McMaster, 3-star general, well documented that he started playing rugby at West Point, switched from football. But how'd you get a 3-star general to write an introduction to your book?
This is something I'm going to just. This is really bragging. When I knew about him, obviously because of West Point rugby, and in 2018, so before the book became a thing, I tried to get an interview with him when he was working for Trump as national security advisor, and it didn't work. And then I said, if I only ask you about rugby, not politics, would you do it? And Tony Ridnell helped convince him, and he said yes.
Oh.
Tony Ridnell being Seattle Seawolves eminence now. So it kind of didn't work out to do in person. I went down to DC and missed him, but I spoke to him basically as he was driving away from DC with all his books in the back of his car, having been fired by Trump. And we did a really good interview about rugby and the warrior ethos and stuff. And the reason I boast about it was it totally baffled the Washington press corps, because McMaster didn't speak to anyone when he was working as national security advisor. Apparently, well, the story, I mean, I don't know. The story is he didn't leak. He didn't give interviews. So there are a few mainstream writers around saying, what the hell's this? There was a New Yorker profile of him for which he didn't speak. And then about a day after that came out, he gave a 2,000-word interview to The Guardian about rugby. So I was quite proud of that. And he and I just stayed in touch. He got involved in the book proposal process for a bit and gave me some advice and tried to hook me up with an agent and stuff. It never quite came off, but we just stayed in touch. Now I did another interview with him for his second book, Battlegrounds, in 2020, which was more about politics in his book, a little bit about Trump. And then one of the great things about this book has been the absolute generosity of the old Grey alumni at West Point, and I went last year to their weekend in March the first time to try and keep up with the drinking and so on, and then ended up in the bar with HR late at night. So the introduction kind of came from there. Really, it's just sort of being lucky enough to get to know.
Wow. Yeah, Martin, with this book, other than readers loving it, what do you want? How do you want the readers to react? What do you want them to take away from it?
There's a number of things. I want it to tell an American audience something about rugby, because it's literally the characters, apart from Clint Oleanick, who sadly, I should have said, who sadly died in 2021 in his early 40s. Apart from Clint, none of the players had played before they got to West Point. Clint played at high school in Colorado. So I think I'm hoping it's a vehicle for the sport. It's a story. It's impossible. It's not been possible to categorize it. Well, Godine was slightly tearing their hair out. It's like, is this a sports book or a military book? And it's like, well, both. And they're hoping to sell to both audiences, I guess. which will pull in. You'd hope you'd pull in military people who read military books or Iraq books who don't know much about rugby and might understand it, and you'd hope that it can help in the next few years seeding the ground for the World Cups. I mean, that's thinking big, but you would hope it could. I mean, it's a one of the early pitches in the first proposal was if this was a movie, it would be Friday Night Lights meets Band of Brothers, which is not as original as I thought it was, because I found a book about West Point basketball in the Second World War, which said this is like Friday Night Lights meets Band of Brothers on the front of it. It's like, okay, one of the things where you think you coined something and you didn't. So it looks like plagiarism, but it wasn't. So yeah, I hope it can teach people about that. I also, you could not care about rugby, and I think you would still be reading. I hope you would still be reading a story about a close knit band of soldiers, and it says in my preface before the introduction, it explains why it's a book about Iraq, not Afghanistan, which is basically time. Afghanistan comes into it a little bit, but it's basically about Iraq because that was the dominant war when the O2 team came out into the army. And it does, again, it's not a spoiler, it ends with the death of Jim Gerbitz in Baghdad in November 2005, about the lowest point of the US occupation, where everything was, before the surge, where everything was going very wrong, where civil war was about to start. So it's a big claim, but it's a book about that first half of the Iraq War as well.
Right. Well, Martin, man, this has been a blast. I really enjoyed having you on here for this past 30 minutes talking about this book. I did want to ask you really quick before you go. It looked like you went from Leeds to New York to DC soon. You keep getting thrown out of cities. What'd you do wrong this time?
This time it's a switch because the Guardian editors want me to go and break some news, like cover breaking news and try and break some news in Washington. So at the age of 45, I'm becoming a politics reporter.
Wow.
Which, a bit late, but it's it's something I enjoy doing with the things like the book scoops and stuff. So I'll give it a go.
All right. And lastly, when does the book come out and how can readers get it?
17th of October. Slightly later during the World Cup, but still while the World Cup's on. And it is pre-orderable from all book websites, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, and particularly bookshop.org, which is the site that benefits independent shops.
Oh, fantastic. Martin Pengelly, thank you so much for joining us. Looking forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you very, very much indeed for having me. Thank you.
All right, have a great night.
You too.
All right, for those of you just joining us now, we just had Martin Pengelly, journalist and author, releasing a book this October called Brotherhood, When West Point Went to War. The story is fantastic. If you want to read a little bit about it, just look up a 2015 article in The Guardian online, and it tells you a lot about the book, a lot about what he wrote about, what he's writing about. But again, this goes back before, I guess, the beginning of him writing the actual book. So check it out. And also, again, if you want to listen to this, you can actually listen to this podcast released tomorrow if you missed most of this interview. But with that said, I think it's time to move on to our next guest who is waiting here. Joining us now to talk about Navy rugby, social media sensation. Oh, yeah. She plays a little rugby, too. Let's all welcome US Rugby 7-star Ilona Maher. Hi, Ilona.
Hello. How are we?
We are good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm just hanging out. Just for reference, Ilona Maher.
Ilona, thank you. I listened to like 4 highlights earlier today and asked Fitzy. I get names wrong all the time. So it's not just you.
I don't even mind anymore. Everyone says it wrong. At this point, I'm like, just call me whatever. I respond to many things, to be honest.
No, I'm glad you corrected me because it's like the worst thing for me. Why do I get names wrong? I'll get John wrong if you get.
Yeah.
Okay. How are you? And also, more importantly, how's the rehab going?
Yeah, I'm good. So I'm just kind of hanging out at home in San Diego. I thought it would be a little bit different summer. I thought I'd be, traveling around Greece after the last tournament, but instead I'm here just kind of recovering and doing PT. So I broke my fibula and then displaced my ankle 8 weeks ago. So I'm just now out of the boot. I'm walking on it, putting weight on it. So making some progress, which is nice.
Was this your first major injury?
I would say, yeah, one that's really taken me out. I've done a lot of the ligaments on this ankle before, but they were able to heal and I never missed a tournament. But this is the first one that's really, required surgery, required a big rehabilitation time. So it's definitely different for me.
Right. And what's the return look like? How long do you think? Wait, is there a date?
So
maybe?
it's kind of at a weird time right now well, since we've qualified for the Olympics, we have a lot of time off, and this just allows me a lot of time to focus on recovery, which is great. So, I'm not trying to rush anything. I could be back, August, September-ish, but again, no need to rush this process. Say we had a big tournament coming up in July, and it relied on this tournament to qualify for the Olympics, but we're kind of set. We're sitting in a nice place, so I'm just going to take my time with it.
Before Fitz, I know you want to jump in here, but it took me a while. So I had a new ACL put in, repaired meniscus. Just through that, I lost a lot of muscle in my left leg. How are you keeping up with strength?
Yeah, what's interesting is this is one of the better injuries to do because it's not too long rehabilitation time, and you do they want to get you moving pretty soon afterwards to get that joint mobilized, to get that muscle back in it. So it's been good. I haven't lost too much. I did a body composition. I've lost about 3 centimeters on my left side around my thigh and calf. But other than that, it's been really good. I really do have the best trainers who are working with me, and it's kind of been a lot of one-on-one with my team being gone. So they're definitely keeping an eye on me.
Ilona, I think what I enjoy most about watching you play is you're such a competitor on the field. So I got to ask, has it been tough for you to have to kind of watch the team from the sidelines of the past couple of months?
I mean, it can be very sad because, my goal going into this season was I want to qualify for the Olympics, not just for myself, but because this qualification means funding, means all sorts of stuff for us. So that was my big goal. And then to not be there when we did qualify and be behind that sign, knowing that I was such a big part of it in those past tournaments and that I didn't really get to finish the job was definitely very sad. But then also in another way, it was very cool to see how well my team did without me. And it gave me a sense of almost confidence going into the season. Well, man, we have a bench, we have numbers that we can rely on. And it just means that I can do my job a little bit better as well.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the makeup of this year's squad, right? You mentioned veterans like yourself, Naya Tapper, Kelter certainly leading the way. You add in some new, young, exciting faces like Summer and Sammy. What made this team so good this year? What brought it all together?
It's so interesting because it's such a turnaround from last year. Last year, we kind of were just a team that didn't really know what we were doing together, I feel like. And some days we'd be on, some games we wouldn't. Most tournaments, we wouldn't even make it past quarters. So it's definitely interesting to see that, 180 that we've done. I can't really say what it is. I just think that it's a buy-in to actually the system and people running the system and understanding, if you do this here, this is what this is going to create instead of, trying to go off of it and do something that just doesn't work for how we play, how we want to play. And I just think having a really solid group of women who we vibe well together, we have a great culture together, and we just genuinely love being with each other.
Well, listeners, if you'd like to come up here and ask a question of our guest, Ilona Maher, you can do so by requesting the bottom left of the app. You need to be on a mobile app, the Twitter app, in order to do so. If you're on your browser, on a computer, whatever else, you can't do it from there. But you could DM us on Instagram or Twitter, and we'll try to get the question up. But go ahead and request come on up. I know she'd love to hear from you. So speaking new staff, new players, whatever else, Emily Badwell comes in, takes over head coach duties. What has Emily brought to the team?
Well, it's been very interesting. I think she brings definitely different perspective that a lot of us have had with our coaches and with rugby in the U.S. Here we have an American woman, which I think is really cool. You get a different perspective as well being coached by a woman, and I think it's something that maybe we needed on this team. I think she's really special in that she cares a lot about our team and really understands the individual players and what everybody's bringing. She's been around this program for a while now. She knows how we play. She knows our strengths. She knows how people get together. So I think just having a seriously deep knowledge of the team she's creating and an absolute passion for it. So
Yeah, great. And by the way, congrats on your World Rugby Dream Team honors. There's some heavy hitters on that list.
yeah, and that's kind of cool. My goal going into the season, because I was hoping maybe to get it last year, and I just remember sitting there waiting for it to be called, and I wasn't called, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna get it next year then. Keep it from me this year, but I'm gonna get it next year. So super, super proud to get that, and to be the only, American only woman up there not from Australia and New Zealand, I think is really cool, and super honored, because I think it's well deserved. And even if it wasn't me, I think one of my teammates should have gotten it, because we did so well this season, and we're so consistent. And Kirsch is deserving of it. Nia's deserving of it. So proud to have gotten it. Was definitely sad to not be there to accept it and be like up there with the yellow and black jerseys and be the one American. But again, it was super cool.
Part of me is hoping, when I saw the video from World Rugby, I was really hoping they would have a highlight of you with that knee cart you had, like wheeling into a store.
Yeah. I don't think that would go with the brand aesthetic, but they could
with the announcers in there. Oh, Ilona Maher.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to our first listener, Alistair. How you doing?
Hello, I'm doing well. How are you?
Great.
So I just wanted to ask a question about PR7s, and I'm really just curious how players in the US are thinking about it as an opportunity, and whether because from the outside it seems like a great opportunity, but I'm curious to get your perspective as a player.
I think PR7s is really cool what they're doing. I think a lot of the girls, the women that I know, are very excited to be playing in it, because it gives them an opportunity to play high level with other high level players, and also to be paid for it, which is, something that's major bounds. I know that PR7s is really releasing some big names. They got Waka playing for them, and Tui and some other big names coming over. So I think it's really cool. I personally am not playing in it, but I know some of my teammates are. And from what they've said in the past last year, they really loved it and had a great experience at it. And even just from myself watching from the outside, I've been impressed by the level of play. So I think this is just another stepping stone to like ID talent, because already some great talent that has been ID'd from it. And I mean, from what I can tell, all the players really do enjoy it.
Great question, Alistair. Appreciate that. Ilona, I want to jump to Paris Olympics real quickly. Again, talk a little bit about this season. Again, the accomplishments. Automatically qualified for the Paris Olympics. Finished the 2023 season in third place, earning 6 medals, the most ever for U.S. Women's 7 squad. So we're a year out from the Olympics, and I think a lot of folks, myself and Bill included, are pegging your squad as a serious medal contender. Is it fair to say the Olympics pretty much the only thing on the team's mind at the moment?
You know what's interesting? I think it's kind of really far from the mind, actually. I think what we've learned is if you put so much pressure on getting that medal and that one thing at the Olympics, you start to forget about the other things. And that was something that I learned at the last Olympics, that you put so much pressure, especially as Americans, like getting a medal at the Olympics, that we don't forget that we're still playing a season and every tournament is really important. So personally for me, and even like, I guess after the COVID experience, like, who knows if the Olympics is going to happen? I kind of think that way. Like, I don't try to get my hopes up for it after what happened last time, because I was just so devastated. So we're definitely excited for the Olympics, but we're not getting ahead of ourselves. We're trying to be really present and like focus on each tournament. So like, next we might go play in Fiji, and we're going to maybe do the Pan Am Games. Like, those still are very important tournaments. And I think if you just focus on Paris, you're forgetting about the memories, the things that we're going to do the whole year in between that we could make some serious bounds with. But I mean, it is the Olympics, so it is in the back of our head, I guess.
I probably should have paid closer attention to the TEDx talk that you gave.
Yeah.
Where you literally
You're good. You're good. I just said it. You're good.
Ilona, let's jump back a bit. I want to talk Quinnipiac. The documentary Believe is coming out in the fall. You're featured in the trailer, of course. Pretty excited for the fans to see it?
I'm excited to see it. I wasn't able to go to there's a 10th anniversary
Premiere.
of KU Rugby reunion. I wasn't able to go to it because of my ankle.
Hmm.
But I'm super excited. I mean, that program did so much for me, and I think is a big reason I am the player, the person I am today. And I think the program there is like shaped me to be an Olympian athlete. So I'm excited to see it. I think people think of Quinnipiac as a place that maybe doesn't produce. You don't go there to be a USA rugby player, but I think I'm a big showing that it really doesn't matter too much where you go. It matters like how you make use of your time, how you play, present yourself, and what if you have a goal to kind of really focus on it.
Now, did I read this correctly? You played basketball, field hockey, soccer, and rugby at Quinnipiac?
Oh, no.
I know. Where'd that come? It was on the USA Olympics page for your bio.
Okay. Very wrong.
Yeah. Okay, how do you play some of those at the same time?
Yeah, I played 3 sports in the fall is what it sounds like.
Yeah.
No, I just did. Quinnipiac is a D1 NCAA sport, so I was just able to do rugby there. And it was awesome, and it was a very tough sport. We had our 6:30 a.m. lifts, and we trained every day, and we had to match. And I think what's getting there is I've always been an athlete. So in high school, I played field hockey, basketball, and softball. So that is just like something I think I attribute to a reason I'm such a good rugby player is because of all the sports I played before playing rugby.
Now our first guest of the show, Martin Pengelly, was doing a story and a video in 2015 on Army Rugby, which was shot, I think, when Army was playing Quinnipiac. And he was wondering if that was you 30 seconds into the video destroying a fly half, just releasing the ball. The fly half looked quite scared. Do you have any recollection of this?
When was this? When was it?
2015.
It probably was.
Probably was.
2015.
Go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, I'm still here. Someone told me, the Quinnipiac Twitter account today told me it was the scrum half, whose name I could find out.
That's a big scrum.
And I destroyed him?
No, I think they said it was the Quinnipiac scrum half whose name I should be able to
Mason Johnson, probably.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you, Martin.
We did some really cool stuff with that program, and I think we really showed that rugby can be an NCAA program, and if you put funding behind it and give these girls a shot, it's just it's really a sport that can be up there with basketball, field hockey, and all those other sports that get a lot of money.
And not to mention, I think fall rugby in New England is unbeatable. There's just something about that.
For sure. And what I think is interesting though is like that's 15s rugby, and I just don't play 15s anymore. But I think 15s rugby, as my dad calls it, is real rugby. So I think there is something to be said, and like hopefully continue that fall 15s rugby because it is really special.
I'm glad you brought up 15s. Is that done? No way down the road?
No, I would love to. My goal is to at some time go play in the Premier League.
Oh yeah.
I think it would be super cool, but I'd love to play in the World Cup in 2025 in England. I think that is going to be another record-breaking event for the game for women. And so, I'd go either way, but I would love to be playing in it. But I think beforehand I'd have to do a little bit of 15s training because I've kind of lost it all. I don't really see the game like I used to, but I do think if I were to, play against the best and really immerse myself in it, like with a Premier League team, I think it would really be cool for me.
Right.
Wouldn't it be great if it was the WPL, right? I mean, ultimate goal, right? The WPL gets to the point where it is at the Premier 15s.
100%, but I honestly want to go to England. I think I'm going to find my husband over there. I got to get over there.
Nice.
Well, Ilona, we got to ask. We got to talk about this, right? Social media. You've been quite the star on online, on social, quite the influencer, I guess. You blew up certainly at the Tokyo Olympics. Was that something that you kind of set out to do, or was it just something that it became viral and then overnight you were just like, well, I'm just going to run with this because this is my personality?
Well, I'd gone into it knowing that people were made at the Olympics. Michael Phelps, Simone Biles, these are people whose lives, careers were made at this short event, of over 4 days. But I also knew that I wasn't going to be the best player in the world and people were going to take notice. You know, I don't play an individual sport like that. So I kind of was like, well, I have to get crafty at it. And I do believe I have maybe a personality that a lot don't, and I'm not afraid to show that. So I just kind of really went into the Olympics knowing that this is a very important time for athletes to make themselves for the ability to maybe when they're off the Olympics make money other ways. So I wanted to make the TikTok because I knew the TikTok has a reach that many other apps don't, and I made it a mission to get myself out there, get my team out there, also so that people would tune into our sport because you know it was COVID, no fans were there, so we needed that support back home.
Well, I got to ask you then, are you any concerns if TikTok gets banned outside of Montana, around the rest of the U.S.?
You know what? I am not concerned because what am I going to do? I don't really care that much. Like, it's been an amazing app for me, but I just don't, you know, I think that if you take away TikTok, people are going to flood to another app. So, okay, I'll go work more on Instagram or whatever it is. I am not too sad about it because I just think if you take away one, another's going to pop up, something else is going to be created. So it's not really on my mind, which I think a lot of people are confused about, but I'm like, what am I going to do? I'm not going to change anybody's mind. So whatever happens, happens.
Where do you get some of your best ideas for your videos? Do you just experiment or whatever comes to your mind? You're like, hey,
Honestly,
I'm going to run with this?
You should just be inside my head because I am constantly making stuff up. It's really just for me. I think I try to go for relatability. Like if I think of something funny, I'm like, you know what? Other people have gone through this, or this is a funny thing that probably someone else has experienced, because I think that's what really works with people is like, oh, we all have a very universal experience. And by someone saying it like, oh, that's me, that's what happens to me, I think is what has been successful for me at least. And then I just kind of try to like, personally, I've found that people are really interested to see that a very muscular woman who's a threat on the field can also be feminine. So like kind of playing into that and showing what's possible, and that, you know, these female athletes shouldn't be put in a box, and rugby players can be all sorts of things.
You know, back during the New Zealand World Cup, 15s World Cup, there's a picture of Jenny Cronish inhaling a meat pie. And I saw that, and I said, what would Ilona do?
Yeah.
There would definitely be a video there.
Yeah, 100%. But that's the thing. It's like when you become this content creator, everything could be a video. So there's also that weird having to balance that, right? Of like, you don't just have to create everything, because everything is a way to get yourself out there to make more money. So it's that balance you have to find while doing it. All
right. So Fitzy and I have our pens ready. What is the balance? What's the magic formula for getting a video to go viral? All right.
Be insanely hot like me. No, I don't really know. I think it's just really finding something that people universally relate to.
Yeah.
Like something that they're like, oh my gosh, that's me as well. That's so funny. Or, oh, look at, she's big like me. That's so wild that she has this sort of confidence. Well, maybe I can have this confidence. Like, you know, my fan base is very much so women from like 18 to 35. And like a lot of women, we have the same struggles of feeling too big, of being told we're too much, of not wanting to work out because we're manly. So like for me, I know that all these women are feeling that, so I can tune into that and can share that with them, because I know that that's how they feel.
Well, my daughter, my older daughter, who plays college soccer, follows you. She doesn't do much with rugby, but she follows you. She came to me not long ago. Do you know who this is? And she loves you. So keep doing it.
Well, you know what's really interesting is that most of my followers, I would probably say 70% of my followers actually don't play rugby. Mm-hmm. The girls that come up to me on the street and people who come up to me aren't rugby players, most of them. They're just people who follow my content, which I really so happy about. Yeah. That, you know, I'm reaching the rugby community, but my main goal is to reach those who don't know rugby and to get rugby out there.
So you recently started hosting Ask Me Anything, and a series on Instagram. Looks like you're having a blast with that series. Talk about that.
Yeah, so I love working with brands like Together, Just Women's Sports, just that are really committed to women's sports. To me, I think people think I have some sort of extra knowledge. I don't really. I just make a lot of stuff up. But I think what's cool is that I'm not afraid to maybe share the awkwardness, the weirdness, the things that I've felt, because we are sometimes given a very doctored up view of the world, a very perfect view of the world. And I just like to think that maybe I give a more realistic view and a more realistic view on things and life and dating and being yourself.
Ilona, I've got to ask, what's been your favorite question you've been asked so far on that series?
Favorite question.
Or have there been any questions where you're like, I can't answer that? There's no way. They can't allow this.
They've been giving the questions to me. I've gotten a lot of the single questions. I'm like, these people behind the keyboard, I'm like, what are you going to do about it, you punks? So I've had to answer that one a couple times. I'm just still waiting for a billionaire to slide into my DMs. We'll see if that happens. I mean, because of this series. But no, I just think people, they want to get to know me, want to know how I am the way I am, I guess.
Got it. All right, so it's Bill and I's turn to ask you some off the wall questions here. So some fun questions here. Who has the best nickname on the team?
Best nickname on the team. You know what? We're really not like other rugby teams where people get cool nicknames. I think the only one would be like Nana gives people nicknames. So she calls Lauren Doyle Princess. She calls Nicole Tank. But really, we all got, what we did do once? We did make up like fighter pilot names, but like really from embarrassing stories we all did. So I can't share those, but that was a fun time.
Well, so that dovetails well into the next question, which is, who's the best prankster on the team, and can you share a clean version prank with us?
Pranksters. I personally hate pranks, but Jazz will do pranks all the time, or like they'll do something that's dumb, and then they keep the joke going. So they're like, Jazz or Naya's form of like humor is like lying, and then you're like, wait a minute, are you being serious? And like, no, I'm not. And then it's like a weird, like, you can't tell if they're serious or not. So sometimes they'll get me going. I'm like, oh, maybe they are being serious. And then 10 minutes later, we'll be like, it's a joke. So I'm like, what are you talking about? But it's a fun group of people, and I almost wish we were like had a Keeping Up with the Kardashians show, because some of the stuff that we talk about and the way we interact is truly entertaining.
What city is your favorite stop on the tour?
Cape Town, South Africa. I think it's an amazing place. Great food, great people.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I have to ask this because we botched it at the very beginning, but how many different versions of your first and last name have people called you?
It's funny. It's so my name is Ilona Maher. I accept many things, but most people do call me just Lo. I did a podcast recently, and it was like great time, great podcast, and then I go to click on it. My sister goes to check it out for me, and they spelled my name completely. They spelled it Ilohna, and then my last name Marr, and I was like so angry because I just don't understand people. You could say my name wrong, that's fine. It's the people who spell it wrong when it's right there in the caption or above it. And I was just like, I had to message him, and I got a little angry. I was like, this is the worst spelling of my name I've ever seen. Like, go to any of my social media and spell it correctly. So stuff like things like that, like saying my name wrong, I don't mind at all. It's when it's obviously right there and you spell it wrong. I just think it's just like negligence at that point.
Well, I got a full disclosure here. In haste, when I posted really quick earlier, after we communicated back and forth, Ilona. Yeah. Well, the graphic was right, but in the text, it was just, when you type fast, it just comes out. It was just a Y instead of an H. So what?
No, that's fine. That's fine. The guy, this was for he was spelled it phonetically, and I was like, what are you talking
like AI.
about?
It was AI.
Yeah, there you go.
Hey, I want to ask you one question. I was thinking about this earlier, and this actually goes back to Martin's half about West Point. Your teammate Sammy went to West Point. And I asked also Martin about this, if there's any difference in, say, military players, maybe about their intensity on the field, whatever. But to me, for some reason, Sammy seemed, and she's been on the show, she's amazing. She seems she could be really intense. Do I have that right at all?
Yes, but I have to say I don't notice a difference. Or, maybe there is a little bit of difference. I don't notice much difference between like the military and the regular people. I think maybe a way that they definitely how they go about things could be a little bit different. But I mean, Sammy is less intense. She's very passionate, I would say. and she like loves hard, she plays hard, she works hard. So like everything she do, she is going to give her all into, and she's probably going to cry doing it. But I don't think that takes away what an amazing, powerful player she is. I love that she's ready to show emotion and be in the Army and be this powerful woman.
Well, Lo, before we wrap up here with you, anything we should expect to see from you in the next couple of months other than you getting healthy and getting back on the pitch?
I don't know. Hopefully I'll run soon. Maybe I'll see me jogging a little bit. I mean, just, I think, it is interesting, but using TikTok, using these social medias as outlets for myself to connect with people and to share my story. So keep watching on those channels.
We shall. Fitzy, anything from you?
No, this is great. I've enjoyed this short conversation. Thank you, Lo.
Yeah, thank you guys.
We're on a half first name basis now. I love it.
That's right.
All right, Ilona Maher, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a blast. And again, good luck with the recovery. Good luck getting back with the squad and I know you said it, but the Olympics for us as well. Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Have a great night. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to US Rugby Happy Hour Live. I hope you were able to check out our first half guest, Martin Pengelly. Check it out. If you missed it, the podcast will be released tomorrow on your favorite podcast player. And also you can check out the second half as well with Ilona Maher. With that said, Fitzy, anything you want to say about these two interviews? What do you think?
We mixed it up this time. I liked it. It was, it was great.
I like when the first guest sticks around to, double check stats and stuff in the second guest. Anyway.
that never happened before. That was amazing.
Sometimes they do, but they just hang out in the bottom, especially when we do MLR game of the week, when there's one player from one team, one from the other one. They're just listening in, and so they can catch something. Yeah. What's the game plan? No. All right, man. Fitzy, let's do this again next week. What do you say?
Sounds good.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.